Welcome to What to Do When, a podcast from real lawyers with real perspective, where we explore a variety of legal issues and scenarios. Each week, we focus on a new topic and discuss what to do when and if any of these legal scenarios ever happen to you or a loved one. With over 40 years of combined legal experience, our hosts offer their unique perspectives and insights on a range of real-life legal situations.
Hi, and welcome back to What to Do When, a podcast here at Cardani in Richmond, Virginia.
What to do when you're sexually assaulted.
Ooh, Scott, that's a heavy topic.
It really is it's a very heavy topic and very, very serious topic.
Well, so let's start by saying this. I caution the listener to this podcast in a couple of areas, but number one, these are very serious accusations that should only be reported when they happen. False accusations of sexual assault of any kind are life-altering and very, very damaging to a person, and you can get into quite a bit of trouble for making false accusations of any kind, but certainly false accusations of sexual assault can carry a lot of repercussions on everybody involved. So first and foremost, this is really directed at those who have been sexually assaulted, and we'll walk through that. But I just strongly encourage you to make sure that the details are not embellished, that they are to the best of your memory, and we'll walk you through how to help preserve those memories and make sure that you're ready to make an accurate report.
And I want to say one more thing about what Jackie said, the seriousness and why we're so concerned about it, because we see both sides. And what false accusations do is actually hurt true victims. And so when there's a flood of these and there's a flood of false accusations, then when the real person steps up and has a real case, it starts to get tainted, and it's really a sad thing. And that's where our affirmation and our concern is for people who are really victims. We want them to have every right and every specter of justice afforded
Absolutely.
to them. So that's why it's important to us. We're not trying to bash anybody, but I've seen a number of false allegations in my time.
Sure.
Or
embellished accusations.
Yeah, so that's why it's important, because the real victims are the real ones who pay.
That's a great point, Scott. Well, first, what is sexual assault? We've spoken previously about assault or battery, the unwanted touching. Really, I just battered Scott, right? Unwanted touching. But what is sexual assault?
Well, that's really what it is. It's the unwanted touching in the sexual manner, and it can be a sexual body part or something that's considered sexual in nature. And sometimes it's really hard to tell where the intent lies. If a kid bumps a boy bumps a girl at school in the wrong place, was there actually intent to sexually assault, or was it a bump, or was it I'm going to hit Jackie in the back and actually hit her in the front kind of thing? So there's the intent of it behind it, but basically what it is, it's a unwanted sexual touching.
Right.
And it can go further. Obviously, there's rape and there's, aggravated sexual battery. There's a lot of different components to it, but we're just talking generally.
This is sort of a broad brushstroke over the entire category, not necessarily what would be considered a minor sexual assault, which may be an unwanted boob grab, which serious, of course, in the workplace or anywhere, serious. We're not talking about that only, and we're not also talking about this person who was raped, but all of them together as a general guide under sexual assault.
Yes. So, Jackie, what do you do first? You have an incident. What's your first response?
The first thing you ought to do if you've been injured is go seek medical treatment. So,
why medical?
Well, you're going to have a record of what happened. If you walk into an emergency department at the hospital and you make a report of what happened to you. Now, if you walk in and you say, this person grabbed my boob or grabbed my butt, that's not a medical concern, right? There's no reason to go seek medical treatment for that. But we're talking more, on a serious sexual assault, when there has been an injury, and rape is injury. Okay, forced sexual contact is injury.
Or if you've been beat up during something like that,
Sure.
You have bumps and bruises and scrapes and all those things that can be accompanied that kind of assault.
And in our mind, you want to go seek medical treatment first. It's number one, it's going to make a record. And if you tell your care provider what happened, they will call in probably the social worker for the hospital and very likely an investigator or detective from your local police department to help you preserve what happened. Because in an incident like that, oftentimes your memory just isn't clear. And it's the longer you wait after the incident, the less clear the memory is. And maybe not even less clear, but maybe less accurate. Sometimes if you see an accident happen in front of you and there are 10 people there, and you're going to get 10 different stories, 10 different perspectives. And as time goes on, if there's not a written statement, it's very difficult to remember exactly what happened in those details. So going to get medical attention if there's been an injury involved in the sexual assault will help preserve the story and the accuracy of the record of what happened.
Yeah, and remember too, they're looking for DNA, and DNA can be semen, of course, and those kind of things, but it also can be from scratches under the skin and saliva or things. So, they're experts normally in most of the emergency rooms who handle this every day, and their first objective is to collect any kind of DNA or any kind of hair or anything like that can really come up, and that's why they usually get the police involved. So you have this two-step process, and it also preserves the evidence properly. All kinds of things like that are really important in moving forward with your case and proving your case.
Well, do the police have to get involved?
Yeah, they do. I mean, you could take it civilly for sure. You could do what's called a civil case and a money judgment kind of a case, and I've done those, but usually those are after a criminal case is usually heard. But it's not a one or the other or a have to or a must. It's usually, though, in these sort of cases, prosecution is very important because we don't want people out there doing this kind of stuff.
Right. And although it seems intimidating or scary, or you may be experiencing or know someone who's experiencing guilt or shame because of what happened to them, it's really important to get the help that you need. And most of the time, the first step in that is getting medical treatment. And then there's a support network that's offered usually when that happens as well. So it is important to make the report. And it doesn't mean every case is going to go to trial. That's not real.
Sure.
That doesn't happen every single time. But in the cases that are strong and that can be taken to trial, it typically starts because the person went and sought medical attention and they were able to gather some DNA evidence from the victim during that first episode at the medical provider,
or even photos or whatever they need. Photos of the scrapes and the abrasions.
Sure.
They these are fresh wounds, so to speak, and the medical people can testify that just happened. This is a fresh cut on your arm, and it's not 3 days old. It's not 10 days old. All those kind of things.
or showered over, or
Yeah, please. That's probably the number one mistake. I don't know why it's in every movie, but everybody takes a shower.
right.
First thing they do, it's the dumbest thing you could do in the sense of
Preserving the evidence,
preserving the evidence. So it does all kinds of things to the skin and all those things. And I know the instinct is to become clean,
Right.
and I get it, but you have to really fight that instinct. And that's why we say go to the hospital first thing. And if you obviously have close family members or friends, you want to call somebody, meet you there, or take you there, whatever it is. You need that support. You need somebody there holding your hand through this process, because it isn't fun, it isn't nice, and nothing to be scared of. But it's just, your life has been altered, and you want somebody there to hold your hand, and there's nothing wrong with that.
Right. Absolutely right. Well, Scott, what's the next thing after you go seek medical attention? What's the next thing?
Well, that's where the police are going to get involved. Either you're going to report it, or the hospital. Normally, if you're going to the hospital and it's serious enough, they're going to report it.
Right.
But regardless, that's the next step. They're going to send out a detective, or usually a detective. In these kind of situations, it's usually a detective that comes out and does the investigation, and they're going to ask you some questions. The good thing is they've done this for a while, so they understand it. They're not going to put you under all kinds of pressure. They're going to get the general lay of the land as much as they need, and realize that you're in a lot of trauma, and handle that pretty appropriately.
Well, there's TV shows about sexual victims and whatnot, and those, it's Hollywood, right? Keep in mind that Hollywood really puts a different spin on how police handle things in general, but not the least of which are sexual assault cases. But in some cases, if you haven't been injured, your first step isn't medical. Your first step may be calling the police.
Absolutely. I mean, if it's more of what Jackie said, somebody held you down and touched you,
Right. Which is awful.
And which is a battery, a sexual battery. Like Jackie said at the beginning, you may not have any physical damage or any kind of DNA or anything else. If you were fighting and you had some scratches, maybe it's worth trying to preserve that skin under the nails or something like that. But that police report is very important. Again, time is everything. The longer you wait, the worse it gets. And that's what I mean by that, the worse the evidence gets. Time, there was an old lawyer in Richmond for years. I won't mention his name, but his strategy was he would continue and continue and continue and continue and continue cases. And eventually the witnesses couldn't be found, the evidence couldn't be found, and that it doesn't happen as much, but that's still, time is usually on the defendant's side when you wait. That usually helps the person that you're trying to convict or get justice from.
Sure. So make a police report, or do you call the police? You call 911? I mean, does it all depend on where this happened, the severity of what happened?
I honestly think you just call 911. If you believe you've been sexually assaulted, I'd call immediately 911, get somebody out there immediately. That's going to be your quickest. I mean, I think it's 511 is just call the local precinct or whatever it is.
I feel like that's misutility.
I think that is. Sorry.
So don't call misutility.
Don't call misutility.
Unless you're digging in your yard. Don't do that.
I do think there is a general number, and I can't remember it now. But anyways, you can call the police department, but I really think in these kind of cases, just dial 911. Get people out there. Get people around you pretty quickly. That's going to be your quickest, most effective way to get the police involved.
Is there any point in time where you need to get your own private investigator or have someone investigating this from a private avenue versus the police and police detectives?
I think that's the other incident. Sometimes you do, and sometimes you need a lawyer like us involved. It just really depends on your circumstances. But, I think once you've done the immediate steps of going to the hospital and you've talked to the police, there's nothing wrong with talking to a lawyer or talking to a private investigator and trying to figure out what other options. If you think there's some evidence that the police aren't looking at, or you feel like the case isn't being handled the way you think it should be handled, those are really important steps and things to look at.
All right. So 3 takeaways if you're sexually assaulted. First and foremost.
Yeah, first, make sure you document most likely you're going to go to the hospital and try to document it.
And number 2, you're going to get the police involved, whether that was your first step because you weren't physically injured, or it's your second step because you've sought medical attention first. The police are going to be involved and preserve that. It's a chain of evidence, so it's the DNA, it's the maybe saliva, it's maybe a hair that was left behind, whatever the case may be. You want the police involved to help preserve that evidence of the assault to get a proper conviction.
And your story and your statement.
Your story that's not embellished, that's an accurate report of what happened, right?
And then third, we don't want to get the lawyer involved or the private investigator, depending on your case. Especially, a lot of these things will stem out of domestic cases that may turn into divorce or child custody cases or all those kind of things. And a lot of this kind of stuff happens in a marriage or in a relationship with kids. And so it's really important to know how that's going to affect the rest of the situation you got on. For instance, if you were sexually assaulted and you have kids with the guy who sexually assaulted you, you need to know immediately. You need to have a plan in place for your safety and the kid's safety and everybody's safety. So contacting a lawyer and getting all that straight is very important.
Absolutely. The next steps, that's a great point, Scott. The next steps following a sexual assault.
Can I say one more thing? Because I just thought about it. We talked about the second step, getting the police. The police are going to probably direct you to get a protective order. And, so that's really important. And we've talked about protective orders and other things, but I just wanted to kind of clarify that. That's probably going to be a step. If they don't do it, I'd go do it in a minute. And that might be a reason to come get a lawyer. I don't feel protected, I don't feel safe. Can you help me get a protective order? We can certainly help you do that.
And it is a piece of paper, right? It's a court order, but it's a piece of paper. And so when Scott said you're contacting a lawyer and trying to figure out your next steps to get you to a safe place, you or your children or whatever it may be, that's important. Even if you get a protective order, you still need to make sure you're in a safe, secure space, whether that's with friends or family, But definitely understanding that the protective order is only a piece of paper and it can only protect you so much if someone is really trying to get after you. So it's important to, what they say, circle your wagons and make sure that you're taking good care of yourself and leaning on the people who can help you get the answers.
We pray you never have to go through this, but we thought it was important to discuss it and let you all know what to do when.
Absolutely. So like and subscribe here at What to Do When, the Critzer Cardani podcast, and we look forward to seeing you next time.
We hope you've enjoyed this episode of What to Do When. For more episodes, be sure to subscribe to our podcast, and we encourage you to check our archives to listen to previous topics. Tune in next week for a new episode and some fresh perspective from Critzer Cardani.